Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the podcast. I have a special guest on the show this week. Jana, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, Kate. Hi.
Well, I'm super excited today because we're going to be diving into exercise, fitness, menopause, all of these things that
Mm.
affect women. But before we do, can you please introduce yourself to the listeners?
I'm Jana Barrett, and I'm a fitness and movement coach, and I help women over 50, usually a very active women who are either broken, burnt out, or bored with their exercise, so they can transition into new ways of exercising that is more aligned to the stage of life they are currently in. And
Well,
I
I was going to say, I love that you put in board because I think so many women can relate to
yeah.
that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And, I was one of those women too. I used to I used to lift weights at the gym with the guys. And not only I was always injured and always achy and burnt out and exhausted, I was also utterly bored out of my mind. Yeah. So I have discovered the joys of functional training with clubbells, kettlebells, and steel mace, and I never looked back.
So we have to ask straight away then, because clubbells, mace, most people probably know kettlebells, but don't know those other
Mm.
two. What are the other two?
So clubbells are essentially, imagine a baseball bat, but made out of metal. And you can swing it around. You can use it as a bit of a dead weight. It's an incredibly versatile tool to work with. So that's where I kind of started. And in the last 3 years, I have discovered the steel mace, which in my eyes, it's phenomenal tool for exercising. And that is about a meter long tube of steel with a steel ball at the end of it of various weights. So you usually start with about a 4 kilo ball at the end of the mace, and then you can go, all the way up to 30 kilos if you can, handle that. But it's incredible. It's a weapon. It's an ancient weapon. It actually was designed to train warriors and soldiers for battle. But also it's been around for thousands of years because primal humans used to attach rocks to sticks and hunt with it or defend themselves with it. So I think it's somehow wired into our DNA to be working with functional tools like that.
Mm. How did you get into that? Because it's not something like before I came across you, I hadn't heard about them before, and I've been in the fitness space for 20 years. So I'm sure there's lots of
Mm.
people that have never heard of it before.
Yeah, so it has only trickled into the Western world about 10 years ago. It was mainly in India and ancient Persia. So it's only been around for 10 years. I have come across it because I hold a quite prestigious fitness certification called TACFIT, and they started with clubbells and kettlebells. And now in the last few years, they injected steel mace into their training. So I have found out through my coaches in the US and completed some certifications and workshops and upskilled in that. So I have been using it in my coaching business for about a couple of years, and myself for about 3 years. So yeah, it's a relatively new, it's still a little bit underground, but I think it's starting to bubble up in places because people are looking for something that is more interesting, more fun, unique. I think the weights and barbells and dumbbells have been around for a long time. And I think people are realizing that training your body as a bodybuilder with that kind of classic split of chest and back and biceps and triceps and leg days doesn't really make you strong and fit for complex activities. Like for me, that's surfing. Like I need to be fit for surfing, but there's a really complex bunch of movements that I have to perform on the board or off the board. So I never felt that weightlifting was kind of two-dimensional for me, too simple. It didn't really tap into the full potential of what my body can do.
Mm. Well, I can definitely relate to that, which is part of the reason why I got into Pilates and then
Mm.
gyrotonic. Gyrotonic is a spiraling system, so lots of rotation and flexion and
Mm.
extension with, you can add in weight and thing too, because functionally, yes,
Yeah.
we do have to bend down and pick stuff up, which, you can relate
Mm.
back to doing, a squat in the gym. But more often than not, you're not dead straight. You don't have your weight evenly on 2 feet. You've got to lean over, twist, flex, bend. And so working with more movement modalities that incorporate more of that is what,
Mm.
led me into it. So I can definitely see how that would appeal to you. What differences do you see in people's trainings once they move from, say, maybe that sort of gym setup to working with the clubbells and the mace?
They get more enjoyment out of it. That's probably the first thing. It's interesting. It's challenging, not only physically but mentally as well, because you're learning some fairly complex movements where you basically moving sometimes every single muscle in your body, combining lower body movements with upper body movements, rotation, side to side, forward, backwards, up, down. So I think it really grabs people's attention. They often find that they really get out of their heads and into their bodies because you have to focus so deeply. So you have to shut down everything in your head, all the insistent thoughts that often creep in. So it's a bit of a mental break as well. They often, the first thing they notice, because it has so much mobility built in it too, they often notice that they move better and they get rid of the tension, stiffness, aches, pains, and often rehabilitate their injuries too. And they often, what women especially notice is that they feel incredibly energized after their workouts as opposed to exhausted, which is what I used to experience. I remember driving back from punishing gym workouts, and I had 3 children at home, and I was thinking, I don't know how I'm going to get through the day. I'm so tired. So that's that kind of component of feeling really good and energized, and also feeling confident because you are essentially swinging a weapon around your body. So that's going to inject you with some serious feelings of confidence, and you feel like a total badass, to be frank.
Very, very empowering. Like, I can definitely
Mm.
imagine doing that.
It is very empowering. And then obviously, strong muscles but also strong joints, because often the movements are so complex um, that you are also building strength in the small stabilizing muscles around the joint and in the joint and in the connective tissue as well, which is where often people will get injured. The muscles are usually okay. And even if you injure a muscle, it heals fairly quickly. But if you injure a tendon or a ligament or your joint, that's a long journey. And often it's quite hard to come back from that. So what I love about the mace, because you can also use it, you can just swing the mace in one hand. So then the loading and the traction that it, puts on the joint and connective tissue will slowly build it stronger and stronger and stronger.
Mm. Well, that's something that I find with my clients that they definitely underestimate, is if there is a tendon or a ligament injury, that they think it's just going to be a couple of weeks and they're going to be back to normal. And it can be such a long time, or a tear,
Mm.
such a long, sort of process with that rehab that, they get a little better, then it flares up, and then, it's a little bit more up and down than just a normal sort of, I've strained a muscle and I'll rest it and then gradually build back up.
Mm. Yeah, absolutely agree. I mean, sometimes people are looking down, months of rehab because, tendons and ligaments have very little blood flow. They take a long time to heal. And often it's an issue that keeps popping up for many, many years if you don't kind of rehab it properly. So yeah,
Mm.
I absolutely agree with that.
And with that training, do you need a lot of space? Because I'm just imagining in my head, and I've seen some of your videos on social with you swinging the mace around. Do people need a lot of space to be able to do this training?
It's great if you do have a little bit of space. And I often think that because it is such a unique tool, it is so fabulous to be working with it outdoors. It's very portable. You can chuck it at the back of the car and go to the beach, or if you've got a little bit of a garden, it's fantastic. But if you have limited space, you only need about a yoga, kind of the amount of space that I would say a yoga mat will provide you with. So yeah, it's ideal if you can go outside and then you can really swing it around and kind of explore, and it feels really good to be outdoors. But I have a lot of clients who live in the United States and they live in small apartments, and you can modify the movements to suit any space that you have, because a lot of people are also, have winter when it's like -10, -20 degrees and snowy, so they don't have the option to go outside. Whereas I live in New Zealand and I can pretty much go outside most of the year. And you're probably, the same in Australia. You guys have pretty nice weather all year round, unless it's hosing down. So yeah, it's incredibly versatile tool, very portable, and you don't need a lot of space to start off with.
Oh, amazing. So when you're working with women that are sort of hitting that, they're getting to 50 and they're starting to hit menopause, how has your understanding of training sort of changed to work with these women?
So what women need to understand that, and I coach very active women. Some of them are ex-athletes, and they really value their exercise. They're usually very committed and very dedicated, and exercise is a huge part of their kind of well-being regime. So they can't really go without, but they are really starting to notice in their 40s and 50s that the body is just not coping with the level of training that they maybe were able to do in their 20s and in their 30s. So quite often I get women who have chronic injuries. Quite often they will get that fatigue, or they're starting to experience perimenopausal and menopausal symptoms. So often they have very low energy, they lose their motivation, they have joint pain and muscle aches. They have often disturbed sleep. So, when you have a very poor sleep for longer periods of time, you don't particularly spring out of bed in the morning, so ready to go and, go for your 5K run. So I often find that women come to me because they instinctively know that they need to transition into something else, but they are not willing to resign themselves to walking and a little bit of stretching. They still want the thrill, they want the joy, they want the kind of the hard work, the results, the commitment, the dedication. So I just help them transition into training where they have a bit more of a menu of training sessions, so they can pick and choose the intensity that suits their bodies on any given day. So if the perimenopausal symptoms are real bad, they can do just some gentle mace flows or some gentle mobility. But if they're feeling good, they can do some interval strength training and really kind of push it. But it's about reconnecting with the body and listening to the body. What is it telling you? Where is your stress level? You haven't slept very well. That means that your stress is already quite high. Loading your body with another layer of stress, which intense exercise would be, not a good idea. So it's about just shifting the focus a little bit from kind of training like a man, meaning pushing all the time and not really adjusting to intensity, to reading maybe the phases of your menstrual cycle, or reading the perimenopausal symptoms or how you're feeling, and then adjusting your exercise to that. So you can always feel good and you can always still move your body every day, because I think that's really important. But it's how we move it and with what intensity we move it on any given day, which becomes incredibly important in midlife.
Mm. Well, you bring up a few things there, and one of them is that we tend to usually have some type of workout schedule that we stick to. And as women, if we don't follow through, and I'm being one of them, it might get to, say it's Wednesday and that's your day that you usually go to the gym and work out, and say, you're at, you're about to get your menstrual cycle and you're just not feeling up for it. you know, a lot of women will tend to just push through because this is what I
Yeah.
do on a Wednesday and this is, you know, this is the schedule. Like, you know, you just push through it. But, you know, talking as you did about honoring, you know, how you're feeling in your body and where you're at with your cycle, I think can be very empowering for women, not just for their exercise, but their energy, their focus, you know, their productivity, every other area of their life.
Yeah, exactly as you said. I totally agree with that. It's empowering. It is incredibly empowering to intimately know the workings of your body and then adjusting your life to that. And it's quite, I have put together a guide how to train and eat and fast in sync with your hormones recently. And I was absolutely flabbergasted by how many women do not know the phases of their menstrual cycle. They have no idea. They have no idea how the hormones interact with one another and how, you know, how sensitive, like, for example, progesterone is to stress and lack of glucose. And I think that that is such a gap in education that women have, that in, you know, sexual education in schools or in, you know, from your parents, from your mother, we're not really learning the really important stuff. It's how to really schedule our lives around our cycles. And of course, work, it's a little bit more difficult because you're going to have to fit in some, you know, workplace. But with exercise, it's actually really easy to design a program that is in sync with a woman's hormones. And if your training schedule, as you said, is Monday to Friday, or often, you know, I used to have training schedules designed to run for like 6 weeks or 12 weeks. That is a training schedule designed for men. A woman's training schedule needs to be 28 to 31 days. That is the basis of it, because that is our cycle. It takes between 21 and 31 days. Men run on a 24-hour hormonal cycle. So for them, they recover and they can pretty much just exercise the same way all the time. We can't. But we are trying to fit in to those schedules. As you said, you know, Wednesday morning is my strength training workout. Well, what if you are 2 days before your period? You're not going to feel like it, I can guarantee. And then if you don't go, you feel like you are slacking and you're lazy, and there comes that guilt and you don't feel good about yourself. But wouldn't it be amazing to know, hey, I'm in my last week before my period. I know I'm not going to feel super energetic. So I'm going to switch up my strength training session for maybe a Pilates class or a yoga class, or I'm going to go for a very low, light, shorter strength training session where I'm maybe going to focus on skills and technique rather than a performance and output. So it's kind of having that information about knowing where you are at and then adjusting your exercise to that.
Well, I have done it fairly recently, probably in the last couple of years, but it's been a total game changer for me. And I've only really done it because I was delving into learning more about perimenopause, getting ready for it, you know, because I know it's coming, and just wanting to know more about my body and my cycle, and, you know, how it can work for me and obviously how it can work for others. And it's definitely been a game changer, not just for my exercise, but for my work and performance as well. Like you said before, if you're working in an office, you know, you can't control everything around your cycle. But if there's certain things like, you know, you have to give a presentation and you get given a date range, you know, you can select when, you know, it's going to be better, you know, not that week before your period, but, you know, that ovulation time is probably going to be better. So there's definitely things that you can work around if possible.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I'm quite a recent kind of to this as well. I've only discovered this probably about a year ago as well, Kate. So I'm the same. And it has been a total game changer because I run my own business. So I have the luxury to design my working rhythm to my cycle. So when I'm launching things, I always launch them in the first couple of weeks or around ovulation, where your communication skills are very good. if I launched the week before, it would be tragic. I wouldn't want to show up on social media at all. I feel a bit frumpy and a bit fat and a bit kind of lethargic, and it's normal. It's absolutely normal. It's just nature kind of telling us, go and retreat into the cave. You might be pregnant, just rest and take it easy. So it's a very potent information to have for women.
And if there's somebody listening in that's like, I'm not having a regular cycle as such anymore. It's a little bit all over the place. Sometimes it's 5 weeks, sometimes it's then 8 weeks, and then it goes back to 4 weeks. What sort of, helpful tips do you have for them?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I have just experienced it. So I'm just about to turn 47, and I have been always incredibly regular, and I can kind of read the signals as well. I know where I'm at, even if I don't look at, the diary or whatever. But recently I had a 46-day cycle. So after being 29 days for a very long time, suddenly my cycle has stretched to 46 days. So now I'm kind of like, oh my gosh, what do I do? What do I do now? But the idea is that you learn the physiological and emotional and mental signs of where roughly you are in the cycle. So if you are full of energy, very outgoing, you want to go out and you talk to lots of people and you feel kind of on top of the world, you probably are in the first phase. But when you just want to put your trekkies on and snuggle on the couch and binge on Netflix, you probably know that you might be just nearing your period. So I have had to kind of adjust the training. So I just go with how I feel and just take it from there. And obviously there are some women who don't have cycles because they might be on hormonal contraceptive, or some women have hormonal IUDs. So some women don't actually have periods, but you are still cycling, even if you are in perimenopause or even if you are in full menopause. You are still a cyclical being. We will never stop. We'll never turn into men when we stop, our period. So I always tell women in menopause, you're still producing small amounts of estrogen in a form of estrone. So you are still cycling. So then I suggest that women align themselves to the moon cycle, because the moon cycle and a woman's cycle is roughly the same amount of days. I don't think that's a coincidence. So then women kind of select the day one depending on the moon. Yeah. But that kind of transitional period where you are in perimenopause and everything is a little bit all over the place, I think we're just going to have to read our bodies and read the signs and see how we feel and take it from there.
Well, I know definitely being more in tune with my cycle and paying attention to it more, I've read a lot more of the signals much more easily. So I think the more in tune you become, the easier it will be, especially when you get to that. If you can do it earlier on, then when you start to hit that transition phase and things start to go a little bit all over the place, it's going to be a little bit easier to sort of, work out where you are in your cycle, so to speak.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think that it's a really exciting time now because, I have 2 daughters and, you have daughters as well. So how incredible to be able to pass down the information. So then, I have a 15-year-old and a 13-year-old, and they both have periods now. And it is so incredible to be able to teach them about what's going on in their bodies. So then they have more compassion for themselves, and they can take rest when they need it, and they can exercise, and they can eat, and they can fast. And it's exciting because they have all these decades where they can work, where they can live in tune with their bodies and really honoring and listening to their bodies rather than overriding the signals and pushing through, as we've all done.
Yeah, that's it. Getting that information and education earlier on can be a life changer when it comes to understanding your cycle, and then everything that has a flow and effect from that.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. No, it's really good to be able to just tap into that and to kind of spread the word and talk about it. Like I've never talked to my mother about my menstrual cycle. It was really not a very open conversation, or it wasn't really that's okay. I didn't feel comfortable. She didn't never talk to me about it. And I like it that me and my girls just have very honest chats, and me and my clients have very honest chats. You know, sometimes I have a client come through the door and they're like, oh my gosh, I've got a period from hell today. It's like, oh, good. Okay. Yeah, we'll take it from here. It's fine. Glad I'm so thrilled that you've still come, and we'll just adjust everything and make you feel good. So it's kind of lovely to be able to just say it and not feel, being in a safe space where you're being listened to, and you can kind of learn new things about your body.
Well, I love that you said that, because I love two things. One, I have clients that do the same thing. And two, I love that you said that they still turned up, because so many times women will say, oh no, I've got a bad period, or I know I'm going to have one, so I'm going to cancel that class, like preemptive. I'm gonna cancel it. When, if you talk to your instructor, especially if you're doing any type of, individualized, exercise or workout, like I do with my clients and you do with yours, we will tailor the session around that. So we will change the movements that you're doing, the intensity, the number of reps or the load, depending on, if you are having your period right now. And I think if people knew that more too, then they may be a little bit more open to still going to exercise, because then they realize, oh, it's not going to be this terrible session that's going to kill me and, I'm going to feel even worse. I actually might walk away feeling a bit more energized, not as stressed. Maybe those cramps that you were having may settle in that as well. So there can be a lot of benefits, but I think sometimes the go-to is just, oh, I've just got to stay clear of exercise when I'm on my period. And it's not the case. It's just, again, getting that information.
Absolutely. I totally agree. It's kind of the mentality of everything or nothing. But I think that's what we've learned, with the punishing workouts that a lot of women are still doing, the CrossFit classes, the HIIT classes, it's either everything or nothing, and there is nothing in between. So teaching women that exercise is not only good for our physical body, but it's also really good, as you said, for emotional and mental health as well. So having just a nice gentle session when you are having your period will make you feel good, will make you energized, and then also that you won't have those guilt feelings about, oh, I skipped it, and should I have skipped it, or maybe I should have gone. And so knowing and having having a coach like you or me who understands how to adjust the intensity and the workout. And there's always mobility, right? I mean, you can just do half an hour of mobility and reduce all of the movements to their most basic versions. So you're just moving, and you kind of moving everything around. I often think that when you are moving in a gentle way while you're having period, everything just goes quickly, like it kind of promotes the flow, and it shortens the periods, and it encourages your lymphatic system and drainage, and it's so good for you. So yeah, I think it's moving away from the everything or nothing mentality into, there's going to be something that I'll be able to do that will make me feel good.
And I think sometimes that can be a little bit of a barrier, especially if you're working with women that have had that mentality for such a long period. Maybe they've had it, right through to their 40s or their 50s. Trying to change that may be a little bit hard. So if there are some women listening in that they know that they're sort of that type of mentality, do you have any tips or tricks for them to help them to sort of transition into changing that?
I think what I encourage women to have, don't just have one exercise that you do. So like, if you are into HIIT classes, in that time, like the week before your period or in your period, have something else that you can still do that is not as intense. So either go to your HIIT class and talk to your coach if it's a coach who knows how to adjust the intensity, because not all of them do know how to train women, especially women in midlife. Or go for a walk, go for a swim, go for a gentle yoga class, or do some stretching at home or some mobility, just do something else, do something still, but just have a bit of a menu of physical activities, or just do some housework, or do some gardening, something that will still, you're still moving, but it doesn't have that massive intensity component that your normal fitness regime or fitness routine will have.
And touching on the individualized training, how important do you think individualized training is when it comes to everybody, but women especially?
I think it's really important that women find coaches who understand how female bodies work. So there will be I think it will be two different components. It will be, one would be training men versus women, and one would be training sports specific people. So if I talk about the hormones and, men versus women, I had female coaches who were pushing me all the time when I was still weightlifting in the gym. It was always more, it was always heavier. There was never, even when I said, hey, I've got my period, I feel terrible, I don't have any energy, or I haven't slept, they will still go through the prepared workout. They didn't understand that there was the time that something else needed to happen. So I think that first of all, it will be individualizing the training schedule and routine to that monthly cycle. So running on a monthly cycle rather than Monday to Friday, or 6 weeks or 12 weeks. And then, because for example, I coach a lot of very active women who are runners, martial artists, surfers, powerlifters, bodybuilders. So then, obviously training becomes more individualized to really either complement their sport. So often with powerlifters, there's a lot of mobility component because they become quite muscle bound and quite locked up, and a lot of the movements are very repetitive. To someone like a surfer, who you need to really build super strong shoulders and core, because in surfing, it's often the upper body that's really crucial in the performance. In runners, it will be mobility again and injury prevention, but then kind of overall strengthening. So I think that it's important to also find a coach or find a program that will address the needs you have. And also, like, maybe you're a mum at home with small children, so you are doing lots of lifting, so it will again be core strength, post-birth recovery. Or I have people who I have like stay-at-home mums in midlife who have maybe preteens and teens. So they just want to be fit and strong to be able to do fun things with their children and go on adventures and go on some hikes or bike rides or swims in the ocean. So I think just knowing your clients and knowing what they do in life, and then being able to give them the training that will support them in living the best life they can.
Well, I love that answer, because I know, when I teach Pilates, I only have 4 clients, and a few clients over the years have said, do you plan out every class before, I come in? And I'm like, well, I have some idea. Obviously, I know what we're working towards and what your goals are, and, say what loads you're on. So I know what we're progressing through, but I said the exact format of the class, no, because when they come in, I'll say, how are you feeling today? How's the body?
Mm-hmm.
And they will be like, oh, my ankle's been really sore today or something. And so the whole class plan that you may have just pre-done is thrown out the window, because the body you've got to work with on the day, it's not appropriate exercises for them. So I think having that individualized approach is important, especially if you've got certain goals, or maybe you're experiencing pain or rehabbing an injury. I think it can definitely change the way that you look at exercise. And then even if you're only doing that class, that individual approach once a week and getting that tailoring, you can then influence what you choose to do the rest of the time throughout the week.
Absolutely. And I often get people often seek me out when they are already injured, or they are struggling with certain movements, or they no longer can perform at their favorite sport to the level they would like to. So often, you know, you have to strip everything back and start back from basics, mobility, you know, sussing out their biomechanics, how they move, all of the things they kind of crept in over the years that are not maybe suiting them so well. So it's the same for me. You know, if someone's got sore knees, you're going to have to completely structure their training around that, fixing that problem by doing lots of other things to support the body to heal and to be able to move pain-free for the rest of their lives.
And I think mobility is a really big part of that, but not the part that most people want to focus on. They always want to focus on the strength part, but
Yeah.
if we don't have the mobility, then we can't maintain the strength, and we can't get to the range that, you know, the strength is going to be functional and safe. And, you know, and I think sometimes it's flipping that mindset and realizing we do need to do part of our training on mobility. And sometimes for people, we need to dedicate more of our training to mobility. And once we then gain some of that mobility back, potentially, then we can flip it and then focus more on the strength.
Kate, this is a conversation I'm having every single day with people because mobility is not sexy. It's not sexy. And it's often an afterthought. It's often something that people only do when they are in pain. But actually realizing that if you're not doing mobility after you turn 40, most days, you are setting yourself up for a life of aches and injuries and eventually losing your independence. Because I think what people don't realize that if you lose your mobility, like in your hips, you can no longer get in and out of a car. That means you can't drive anywhere. You can no longer get in and out of a chair easily. Maybe you can't walk down and up a stairs. Maybe you can't play on the floor with your grandchildren anymore. Not having mobility, it's going to have an incredible impact on your life as you are aging, going forward 10, 20, 30 years. And I see it all the time with people. And then, you know, often I train people, women in their 40s and early 50s, with aging parents. So they see it. They are very aware of what lack of mobility training and strength training can do to a human body by the time they get to 70 or 80. It's a miserable life. But the thing is about mobility, you only have to do 10 minutes 5 times a week and you're covered. It's not a training that you really have to dedicate a lot of time and effort to. These are simple movements that you can do as you roll out of bed in your PJs in the corner of your bedroom, and it takes 5 to 10 minutes. Or you can sandwich them into your day, maybe when you're waiting for the kettle to boil. It's 3 minutes where you can actually be doing some arm circles or getting into your thoracic spine or doing some hip stretches. Like it's not that complicated, but it should not be an afterthought. It should be the number one priority, because mobility is essentially strength training for your joints and connective tissue.
And also, I say to my clients, it's those everyday movements that you start to try to avoid that you really need to be doing, like picking something up off the floor, bending down to empty the dishwasher. You know, I had a client that said to me, well, I don't have to do that stuff. And I said, why? And I said, because I just get my kids to pick stuff up off the floor for me. And I said, well, what about your washing machine? They're like, no, I've put that up on blocks. So now I don't have to bend down for that either. And I'm like, but this is where the issues then start to creep in. And the same with, you know, comfort. You know, we, you know, drive and we go to the shops and we park. We want the park right next to the front door so that we don't have to walk far. But it's all these in-between movements that we should be doing in our everyday lives that helps to contribute to maintaining our mobility. And as we slowly strip those out, and then we're not doing any mobility work, you know, any planned mobility work either, that's when we can start to experience those sort of joint issues, you know, tightness and then pain.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. It's those incidental movements that often add up Like I'm often so surprised when I'm just pottering around the house at the weekend. Sometimes I do 20,000 steps and I haven't even gone for a walk. And I was like, wow, that's incredible. So it is that kind of choosing the hard now so then your life can be easy later rather than choosing the easy now, which will then give you the hard life. So taking the stairs instead of the elevator, you know, parking a little bit further away from the store so then you get a couple of hundred steps, you know. So yeah, I totally agree with that. It's just little movement. It doesn't have to be just structured exercise. It's often that incidental, unstructured physical activity that will add up, you know, to just great results over time.
Well, I know even sort of post-pandemic with a lot of people, they moved from working in the office to working at home, they found that their movement dropped. And so, you know, I was encouraging my clients, you know, every 25 to 30 minutes, make sure you get up, walk around, go get a drink, go to the toilet, whatever it is, rather than, because they would say, oh, once I sit down, I will sit there for 4 or 5 hours straight and not move. And, you know, that's not good for any of our joints, you know, and it's not good mentally for us either. So trying to build those breaks into your day, even if you are working from home or you're in the office and you don't tend to get up and move around a lot, can just be really beneficial for your body, but also your brain.
Absolutely. Those breaks are so crucial. You can just walk around the house, or if you're in the office, just walk to the bottom floor and then walk back up. Yeah, absolutely. I agree. Because sitting is just tragic for us. We didn't evolve to sit down because, you know, your hip flexors are tight and then you are switching off the core, and people have really poor postures now, you know, with those rounded shoulders and the head is forward. So we are slowly adapting the positions that we are in for long periods of time, and we are really meant to move. I mean, our bodies are so happy when we move. You know, we feel good and full of energy. If I have to sit down for a couple of hours, it's my energy just nosedives and I don't feel great. So yeah, getting up every 45 minutes or every half an hour is such a good idea. Just walk around a little bit and go hang up a load of laundry if you are at home, or make yourself a cup of tea. And yeah, it's so important because it adds up over the day or over the week or over a month.
Yeah.
Absolutely agree.
And that's where I think like your trackers, you know, can be helpful in a sense
Yeah.
that if you know, look at your watch and it's like 2 o'clock in the afternoon and you've done 1,000 steps, you know, that can then give you the motivation to go, okay, well, I'm definitely going to go for a walk this afternoon, or I'm going to make sure I do some of the housework to get some more movement in. So I think that's where the beneficial sort of parts of the trackers can help.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you can set up like notifications, like time to move every hour or whatever. So it actually kind of buzzes and tells you, hey, it's time to, you know, lift your butt off the chair and do something. Yeah. So that's great for the people that are sitting down. You know, there's a lot of other people, like my 18-year-old son just started working in construction. You know, so that's another whole different challenge where he's actually working so hard with his body all day long. So mobility for him is so crucial as well, because he is stiff and he is tight from the physical work. So there's also, you know, you must have some listeners who are maybe working in a more physical way. Like I used to be an early childhood teacher. That's an extremely physical job. So then it's not, mobility is not important just for the people who are sitting down. It's also for the people who are working really hard with their bodies, and they will eventually be experiencing some tension and some aches and pains and possibly even injuries. So mobility is important for those people as well. Tradies are massive too. You know,
Mm.
the people in the trades, and even in the supermarket checkout, you know, the people are standing the whole day as well, and that's really hard work too.
And I think too, even if you have a job where the mental load is very high, like you mentioned, early childhood teacher, you're physically, you know, having to do a lot, but then also mentally it can be quite draining too. And you get home and you probably don't feel like doing a whole lot because you feel a bit burnt out, you know, physically and mentally. Then that's where that mobility work can be gentle enough that, you know, it doesn't feel taxing, but can still get you moving and getting benefits from it as well.
Absolutely. I think mobility is so awesome to have, because even when you're injured or when you're really stressed or you're going through a period of maybe, mental health issues, and when you really exercise is kind of off the table for whatever reason, you can always just do 10 minutes of mobility, because you will just maintain the functionality of your body. So often when I have people with really bad injuries or recovering from, episodes of mental health, struggles, you always have that mobility to fall back on, because it's gentle, or people recovering from surgeries. I have actually a couple of clients who are recovering from hysterectomies, and there's very little guidance that women are given post surgery because they are scared to exercise, because they had, abdominal surgery. There is an organ missing, there is healing happening. There's also a lot of emotional and kind of mental stress that comes with that as well. So often mobility is that kind of first step of just testing the waters and seeing how the body responds, because it's so gentle, but you are still moving. So I think having that up your sleeve and knowing how to do a little bit is so good to give us some options when our normal exercise routine is no longer an option.
Well, I love that you brought up surgery, because I don't think it's just, abdominal surgery or, a hysterectomy or anything that where there's not enough guidance. I get clients that have had hip replacements or knee replacements, and, they have their operation and they do their short stint in rehab at the hospital, and then they see the physio once or twice, and then they say to me, what do I do now? Like, where should I be at by 4 months post surgery? What am I working towards? Is this good movement or bad movement? Should I have no pain now? Should it be pain free? So I don't think there's a lot of guidance post any surgery, and I get a lot of clients that come through, and a lot of what we work on is obviously the mobility to start with, and then building on the strength, and understanding that your body heals, and everybody heals at different rates, and it depends on what area of the body's been operated on too. And all of this together, conclusively affects, how far you're going to be in a period of time, strength-wise, mobility-wise, pain-wise. And I don't think that's something that's talked about enough.
No, because you have usually like your 6, as you said, post-op check, 6-8 weeks, then maybe one more, a little bit of physio, and that's kind of it. People are sent on their merry way and they have no idea. And not moving is not an option, but maybe they can't fully return to what they used to do, like lifting weights in the gym, or they're scared. A lot of people lose confidence in their bodies post-surgery. They have no idea what their bodies are now capable of and what will possibly hurt them. I mean, having a hip replacement is massive. I mean, hip is like one of the most integral joints in your body. So yeah, there is very little guidance. And I also think there is also very little guidance in preventing surgeries. I think a lot of people jump into surgeries, but early too. Like I have a lot of clients with frozen shoulders, which is a real common complaint for women in midlife, probably due to a bit of a hormonal, dips and inflammation, but it's also a mechanical issue. But often they go down the surgery road, which very rarely works. But you could just go down the mobility and strengthening route, which actually always almost works. So there is also that. It's trying to avoid, obviously, if your hip is, really damaged, you have to have a replacement. But the question is also, why are you having a hip replacement? I mean, the lifespan of a human joint is 120 years. So if people are having hip replacements at 50, 60, 70, that means that they are doing something, unless it's a disease, of course, that they are doing something that is wearing out the hip. So is it poor biomechanics? Is it lack of strength? Is it lack of mobility? You could actually avoid surgeries down the road if you really pay attention to your mobility and your strength and the way you move.
Yeah, 100%. I was hearing another Pilates instructor was telling me the other day that one of her clients in his early 60s, he'd just gone off and had a hip replacement, and 2.5 weeks post-surgery, he rode 30 kilometers on his push bike because, he is an avid cyclist and he wanted to get straight back into it post-surgery. And I was like blown away. I was just like, even if he thinks he has the strength, the wounds are still healing. And if somebody not, if a car hits him, if he somehow comes off that bike, he is going to shatter that hip. You know what I mean? I was, yeah, so taken aback by that. And that's
That's
where,
crazy.
yeah, it is really crazy. I was just like, seriously, I know post hip, they say start to get on your stationary bike because you want to just gradually start to build up that strength around the hip, quads, hammies, all the rest of it. Great. But 2.5 weeks to get back on a road bike and cycle on the road. And this is where I think that care, that post-care plan, having a really good team can be fantastic. So whether or not, you've got support from your surgeon and then a physio or your Pilates instructor like me or your osteopath or whoever it may be. The only issue I find with that though is, sometimes it's cost. If you can't afford all these things, coming out of that and knowing what to do is difficult. And I don't know how to solve that problem, but it is
Yeah.
something that, I definitely come across with my clients. So, if they're coming to me and, I know that I'm one person in their team, or maybe I'm the only person in their team, then, I will try to help them the best I can and give them stuff that they can do at home.
Yeah.
But it can be really difficult.
Yeah, it can, especially when there's a financial barrier to that as well. And it seems like, I don't know if it's probably like that in Australia and in New Zealand too. There is a very little kind of plan for people. And I think it's really sad how so many people are living with chronic pain that is probably 95% preventable with a bit of mobility and a little bit of simple strength training. And I'm not even talking about mace or weights or, going to Pilates classes. I'm just talking about doing some squats and push-ups at home. Because, there's a lot of people who are just not into, either they can't afford it or they just don't have the option. Maybe they don't drive. Maybe, they're kind of lower socioeconomic groups, but you can still do a lot if you just do a little bit of mobility and some very simple body weight exercises at home. And it can probably prevent, I would say, 90% of all the pain that people are living with these days. And you can see it. I don't know if Australia is the same, but I often kind of watch people, and a lot of people look that they are in pain. They move in a way that suggests that they are in pain. And that makes me quite sad because it's quite easy to fix it.
It's the same here. Yeah. And
Mm.
I'm a bit like you because I'll watch movement patterns and I'll watch how
Yeah.
people walk and be like,
Yeah.
hey, okay, they're not extending from the hip, which therefore, they've probably got a lower back issue happening there because I can see that there's no glutes. Those types of things run through my head. And I think, that pattern has developed somewhere along the way because of some reason. And if we can, go back and address those patterns and, like you said, start to work on some basic mobility, it can improve so much.
Mm. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I love the people watching. Yeah. But it often makes me quite sad. Yeah. Like you can kind of see it, tight hamstrings, a bit of a hip issue. You can see that, when they're kind of wobbling a little bit. And these are people that are fairly young too. So it is sad. Usually probably due to inactivity, I would imagine. But yeah, it would be nice to be able to fix the world just with some exercise and fix the pain and reduce the medication use. And I think people will be a lot happier.
That's it. But that's what we're trying to do with our movement, with our
Yeah.
clients, one person at a time. Now, before we finish off, I always like to ask my guests that for anybody listening in, if they could walk away after listening to this podcast and just instigate one thing, what would you suggest?
I would suggest just move every day. in some way. It doesn't have to be, and I actually think that people overcomplicate exercise. I don't know if you agree with that, Kate, but I think people just overcomplicate it. It's actually not that difficult. Just do something, even if it's just going for a walk or doing some gardening or doing a little bit of mobility or just doing some squats or some push-ups, against your bench while you're waiting for your kettle to boil. Just do something, because if you don't use it, you will lose it. And I often tell people, exercise for health and longevity rather than anything else. Don't exercise for the aesthetics or for losing weight or looking a certain way or the, bikini body in 6 weeks. But think about your old lady body and think about the choices you're making today. Will it kind of ease your life, make your life easy as you are aging? So think about the next 10, 20, 30, maybe 40 years.
I love that. I think that's great advice. Maybe some people don't want to think about their old lady body, but it will be here eventually. So it is something that the more that we can work on it now, whether or not, as we've talked about, with it being mobility, but also bone density, muscle strength, then the better movement we're going to have. And then the more independence we're going to have, all of these things, less falls, we know the stats on falls, all these things together add up. And, most of us don't want to start to think about that until we hit 60 and, we notice our balance is not as good as it used to be. But if we start to focus on it in our 30s and our 40s and we lay that bone and we lay down that muscle mass, we're going to be so much better off when we age.
Absolutely. And I think that what people often use age as an excuse, I'm just getting older. And I think that's like one of the lamest excuses you can possibly use, because yes, you will deteriorate physically a little bit as you are aging, but it's an option. It's a choice you can make. You can also make a choice to really cultivate strong muscles and strong bones and the ability to move freely and pain-free with a conscious effort and not become a frail, stiff person that just can't move and do basic things. I think it's a choice. It's a conscious choice that people can make now.
Yeah, agree. Now, where can our listeners reach out and connect with you?
So I have a website, janabarrett.com. You can have a look. I have lots of freebies, from mobility videos to little strength training sessions to a guide how to train in sync with your hormones. And you can also find me on Instagram and on Facebook. And I have a private Facebook community where I run free trainings every single week. And that's probably where people can get the most access to me and my coaching.
Amazing. Well, I'll link all that up in the show notes too. So listeners, head on over to the show notes so that you can connect with Jana, and that Facebook group sounds amazing. I think if you've got that community of people around you too, and you hear other people's stories, then it's very reassuring and uplifting and motivating too.
Yeah. And it's nice to have a safe container where you can say and ask anything, like we talk about perimenopause and menopause and hormone replacement therapy and natural remedies and what's working for some women. And chances are that you would find a person who is going through the same thing as you are, and you can, safely ask, anything that you want. So yeah, I love my Facebook group. It's a great market research as well to see what women are struggling with and what are they facing as they are aging.
Well, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. It's been such a pleasure chatting with you today.
Thank you so much for having me, Kate.